Episodes of Palette Swap are suggested by viewers like you. If there's a character you'd like me to analyze, let me know in the comment section down below. Good morrow everyone, Silvershire here, and welcome back to Palette Swap, where I rank the costumes and character designs of your favorite fighting games. And by your favorite fighting games, I mean my favorite fighting games, and by my favorite fighting games, I mean Soulcalibur. This is episode 32, which officially makes Palette Swap the longest running series on my channel. To celebrate, we're looking at all of Soulcalibur V's newcomers, minus Viola and Elysium because I already covered them in previous episodes. Timestamps are on screen if you want to skip to someone specific. And since we're talking about so many different characters, I'm gonna nix the usual story recap segment and just tell you about each one as we go. Patroklos Alexander is the son of Sophitia, who we discussed in the previous episode. He was raised by his father, who told him stories of Sophitia's heroic adventures, and he dreamed of one day becoming a holy warrior like her. He got his wish, or so he thought, when Graf Dumas began recruiting soldiers to purge the land of Malfested. But Dumas was secretly Nightmare, the leader of the Malfested, and the targets of his purge were actually innocent humans. When Patroklos learned the truth, he turned against Dumas and became the wielder of the holy sword Soulcalibur, though it turns out the sword is just as manipulative as Dumas. Patroklos' 1P resembles some sort of military uniform. He's covered in medals and other decorations, which along with the exotic animal pelt draped over his shoulders convey his flashiness and arrogance. He's proud of participating in Dumas' Inquisition, and it shows. That same exotic animal, which is a caracal by the way, also appears on his armband and boots. His white and red color palette is equally flashy and more aggressive than the cooler hues generally worn by his mother. That leads to one of my criticisms of this design, which is that despite him constantly trying to emulate Sophitia, he doesn't look much like her. Maybe the point is to show that he's bad at emulating Sophitia, but I'd still like some more visual connections between the two. A few years ago, I made an entire video about how great this costume is, and I no longer stand by all the points I made, or even the main thesis, but I do still think it's well designed. It's a perfect encapsulation of his personality. 8 out of 10. His 2P is a set of asymmetrical armor. It cuts back on the aggressive aesthetic of his 1P, casting him as more of a typical fantasy hero instead of an enforcer of Dumas' oppressive regime. The caracal motif returns on his breastplate and waistcloth, and for the latter, it's surrounded by a laurel wreath that embraces his Mediterranean heritage. This costume is somewhat reminiscent of Sophitia's Soulcalibur IV 2P, particularly the shoulder armor. It's not as unique as his 1P, but it is stylish, and like I mentioned last time, I'm always a sucker for a good scarf. Also an 8 out of 10. During the story, Patroklos learns he should stop trying to copy Sophitia and instead carve his own fate, thus becoming Alpha Patroklos. His 1P is mostly the same as vanilla Patroklos' 1P, but with a darker palette and no pelt. It's way less flashy, which reflects his newfound maturity, and the switch from red to blue makes him seem less aggressive. Effective as it is at communicating his story, it's little more than a palette swap, and the one change it actually makes to his model is the removal of one of his most unique features. Also, it's not even canon. In story mode, Alpha Patroklos just wears vanilla Patroklos' outfit. Setting that context aside, it does look cool, but it's a disappointing transformation. 7 out of 10. Bafflingly, his 2P isn't based on vanilla Patroklos' 2P. Instead, it's a palette swap of his 1P, which itself is a glorified palette swap. I'm usually partial towards red costumes, but it's hard to get excited about this. 6 out of 10. Pyrrha Alexandra is the daughter of Sophitia and the older sister of Patroklos. We've heard a lot of tragic backstories in this series, but hers might just take the cake. The sad, sad cake. As a child, she was kidnapped by a Malfested named Pyrrha, infected with evil energy, threatened in order to force Sophitia to turn evil, abandoned once Sophitia died, and eventually sold into forced labor. Things took an ever so brief turn for the better when she was rescued by a man named Jurgis and they fell in love. But then Pyrrha showed back up, brutally murdered Jurgis, framed Pyrrha for it, and gaslit her into killing a bunch of people and becoming the wielder of the cursed sword Soul Edge. That's rough, buddy. Pyrrha's 1P bears a strong resemblance to her mom's usual look, with a short skirt, tall leather boots, and a color palette consisting of white, brown, blue, and gold. The pin on her collar is even taken straight from the belt of Sophitia's Soulcalibur IV 1P. The ornament in her hair, meanwhile, is similar to her Aunt Cassandra's armor. Where she differs from the elder Alexandra's is that her outfit is way less revealing, which is in keeping with her meek personality. There's a running theme of chains throughout this design. There's a chain around her neck, the bottom of her skirt has a chain pattern, and her armband depicts a caged heart wrapped up in chains. This isn't going to win any awards for subtlety, but strong symbolism that represents her lack of agency. 8 out of 10. Her 2P is a magenta dress, following in the tradition of several of her mom's alternate costumes. It continues the chain theme and adds other macabre imagery like skulls and a crying eye, which according to an artist's note are meant to be modifications made by Pyrrha. It's too bad that's never mentioned in-game, because I think it says a lot about their dynamic. She's also wearing a crown of thorns, a physical manifestation of the suffering forced upon her. Again, not very subtle, but it's great visual storytelling. On top of that, this is just a really pretty outfit, and it feels more uniquely Pyrrha than her 1P. 10 out of 10. When Pyrrha embraces her malfested nature and goes full sicko mode, she becomes Pyrrha Omega. Like Alpha Patroklos, this is a glorified palette swap, but it has a few advantages. First of all, it's canon, which is nice. Second of all, it's a more drastic transformation. She has pale, desaturated skin, glowing eyes with dark markings under them, and most importantly, a mutated right arm much like Nightmare's. Female Malfested rarely get more than an edgy makeover, so it's neat to see one who's a bit more monstrous, especially since Soul Edge is shown to take such a massive toll on her. And third of all, she's goth, which always gets bonus points for me. However, this is still held back by being a mostly reused model. There are lots of missed opportunities to display her deteriorating mental state and newfound physical power. They could have given her tousled hair and tattered clothing like in her concept art, or they could have removed Sophitia's symbol from her collar and broken the chains all over her design. I love Pyrrha Omega, but I can't give her a perfect score. 9 out of 10. Like Alpha Patroklos, her 2P is a palette swap of a palette swap. This one is even more disappointing because Vanilla Pyrrha's 2P would have been perfect for Pyrrha Omega. It's kinda neat that she's wearing dark blue and gold like Nightmare, but it's not as striking as the black and red of her default. 8 out of 10. The story recap for Z.W.E.I is going to be pretty quick, because we know next to nothing about him. He's a werewolf, which in the Soulcalibur universe means he can summon a fiery wolf spirit called Ein, and he's an enemy of Graf Dumas. That's it. That's his lore. His 1P is an edgy, modern-looking design. In a recent video, I referred to him as a Hot Topic werewolf, which I think is a pretty apt description. He's apparently not too concerned about hiding his lycanthropy, because his outfit is covered in moons, wolf faces, and fur. He looks cool, but he really doesn't fit the historical fantasy setting of Soulcalibur. Some anachronism is fine, beneficial even, as it allows for more variety in character designs, but Z.W.E.I pushes my suspension of disbelief a bit too far. Also, his color palette is very dark and dull. There is a little bright purple on the inside of his coat, but aside from his collar, you don't see it often. 5 out of 10. His 2P is a cowboy-inspired getup with chaps and a bandana. His torso is meant to look like muscle and bone, and he has a skull on the front of his chest, but the rest of his design mostly abandons the skeletal imagery. He still has moon and wolf symbols, and as much as I like recurring motifs, I think they muddy the design. I would have preferred them to pick a theme and stick with it. I also think the bandana looks goofy covering just the bottom of his chin. Would have liked it to go up higher on his face, or just be loose around his neck. 4 out of 10. Xiba's backstory is kind of a mess. He's the illegitimate son of Keelik, a former Lingshangsu monk, and Xiba, an Imperial Guard. Before he was born, Keelik went to buy milk and never came back, so Xiba returned home a single mother. Her grandpa was furious and wanted to kill Xiba, but then this guy named Yan Wujin married Xiba to save Xiba's life. Xiba still wasn't allowed to live with them for some reason, so Xiba brought him to the mountains to be raised by her dad who she had never met before. And since he was also a former Lingshangsu monk, he trained Xiba in the same fighting style as Keelik. His 1P is based on Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, hence his tiger pelt and spiky auburn hair. His clothes are ripped along the edges, reflecting his wild upbringing. Something has always seemed off about Xiba's design to me, and I think the problem is that there's not much cohesion between the two halves of his costume. His top is mostly symmetrical with a black and magenta palette, while his bottom is asymmetrical with a yellow, orange, and black palette. I prefer this concept art where the tiger pelt stretches up to his torso and the coat hangs down to his thighs, as that helps balance things out. I also think it's strange that he doesn't have some sort of headband, as that's the Monkey King's most iconic accessory after his staff. 5 out of 10. His 2P is based on Keelik's Soulcalibur III 2P. The clothing is nearly identical, but it doesn't quite fit him, and he's wearing it in an informal manner. His collar is open, his sleeves are rolled up, the bottom of his coat is ripped, and his pants are tucked into his boots. Unlike his dad, he has a necklace with a sharp fang or claw on it, letting him maintain some wild energy even when he's wearing a nicer outfit. This is an interesting idea, but I would have preferred something unique to Xiba. 6 out of 10. Yan Leixia is the daughter of Xiba and Yan Wujin. She had a privileged and pampered upbringing, but she longed for adventure outside the palace walls. One day, her half-brother Xiba came to visit and gifted her Devapra Yuga, a crystal necklace that had once belonged to his father Keelik. Xiba clearly recognized it, but refused to say anything about what it was, so Leixia ran away from home and set out to discover the necklace's secrets. Her 1P was designed by guest artist Mari Shimazaki of Bayonetta fame, who also designed the alternate costumes for Ivy and Tira. It's themed around lotus flowers, which were present in some of Xiba's designs but never so prominently. In addition to the actual lotuses on her shoes and in her hair, her dress and sleeves are shaped like lotus petals. She has a simple but beautiful yellow and blue palette that makes heavy use of gradients and transparency. According to an artist's note, this design was meant to have some tomboyish energy, which I do not get at all. It looks very traditionally feminine to me. My biggest criticism of Leixia, in terms of both appearance and personality, is that she's basically just a younger version of her mom. All the other Soulcalibur V kiddos are distinct from their predecessors, for better or worse, but there's not much to set Leixia apart. 7 out of 10. Her 2P looks even more like Z.W.E.I, which makes sense because this outfit was originally designed for her. However, it does have a couple of unique features, namely the short bob cut and the addition of fur. The pattern around her midsection is similar to the one that appears on Xiba's pants, drawing a connection between the half-siblings. The art book refers to this as a Kinkoji pattern, but when I Google that, all I get are pictures of fruit, so I don't know what that's referring to. Overall, this costume is alright, but not very noteworthy, especially in a game with so many memorable 2Ps. 6 out of 10. Natsu is a member of the Fuma clan of ninjas and the apprentice of Taki. When she was a baby, she was possessed by the ancient snake demon Arahabaki. Taki attempted to expel Arahabaki from her body, but it was impossible to do so without killing her, so instead she placed a magic seal on Natsu to weaken Arahabaki's influence and trap it deep within her. Over time, Natsu learned to tap into Arahabaki's demonic power, but every time she does, she risks losing control. Her 1P is an update to Taki's iconic bodysuit. She has bare legs, a brighter palette, and lots of pretty accessories like ribbons and feathers, which makes her seem more youthful and upbeat than her master. Another thing that sets her apart is her hairstyle. In earlier concept art, it was meant to look like snakes as a result of Arahabaki's possession, but now it seems to simply be a fashion choice. While I would have preferred snake demon hair, the final version is still pretty unique. 8 out of 10. Her 2P is a more traditional ninja look. Her slit, baggy pants, and big pointy pauldrons give her a unique silhouette, though her hair is now in a more generic ponytail. Her breastplate and gloves are emblazoned with traditional Japanese symbols called Futatsu Domoe, which also appeared in Taki's Soul Edge 2P. She has a complementary purple and yellow color scheme along with some red and white accents. I don't have a lot to say about this, because it's a pretty straightforward kunoichi design, but it's well done, and it serves as a nice contrast to her 1P. 7 out of 10. And with that, we have ranked every single Soulcalibur V newcomer costume. For all this game's faults, I don't think character design is one of them, though the lack of time and budget did rear its ugly head every once in a while. Fans were so upset about legacy characters getting replaced that they really didn't give the kiddos a chance. But that's just my opinion, so what do you think? Let me know in the comments section down below if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. Also, let me know which character you'd like to see next. For episode 33, we'll be discussing our first Guilty Gear characters, namely Soul, as requested by Bryce, and Milia, as requested by Soul Warrior. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I bid thee farewell.